All right, well, let's get started. We'll open up our prayer books and we'll recite the altruistic motivation. So tonight, if you don't mind, I'm going to do this. So we'll do it in English only tonight, and we'll do it one time each, just to get our mind stream together.
Brown book?
Yes, the brown book. Yeah. Okay. So all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in a state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities and the mandalas of the yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. We'll repeat this 2 more times. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Repeat. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. So now we'll do a meditation. So there is what we call the 7-point meditation posture of Varanchana. Varanchana is one of the meditation Buddhas that we'll learn more about. And Varanchana is symbolic of the wisdom, the all-pervading wisdom that permeates all things. So the 7 points are that first we keep our back straight. Our legs are crossed. If we're sitting on a chair, our legs are flat on the floor, and our hands can be on our knees, or best is to be 4 inches below our navel, with the left hand up and the right hand lying in the left hand and the thumbs touching. This is the classic meditation position. If you prefer to put your hands at your knees, that's fine. And if you like to, move your hands between these two positions is fine, or whatever other position is comfortable for you. But to try and adopt this position is very good. We sit on our sit bones. The sit bones are the lower part of our pelvis. So if our weight is on the sit bones that's on our cushion, then it takes the weight off of the fleshy part of our legs, and our legs are not apt to fall asleep. So that's an important feature. So we should be sitting on the sit bones. Our back is straight. Like I said, our shoulders are back, not up like this, but relaxed and pulled back. So it brings our chest out a little bit, and it pulls our hands naturally right into our abdomen. So and our hands are in the meditation position as I spoke before. Then our head is, of course, on our neck, and our neck is just a little bit forward, and our chin is just a little bit down. Not up like this, it's down like this. And our eyes can be open or closed. If they're open, it should be a gaze that is not a stare, but it's not actually, looking at something and thinking about what that something is, but it would be looking maybe about 4 or 5 feet out in front of us, and just as a simple gaze. In the beginning, it's very good to keep our eyes closed, and that way there's less distraction. But if during the meditation you open your eyes, you can maintain that gaze is very good. And the tongue, your tongue should be on the roof of your mouth, right behind your front teeth. And if you're breathing through your mouth, this will keep your mouth moist. If we like to breathe through both nostrils, to inhale through both nostrils and to exhale through both nostrils. But sometimes people would prefer to breathe through their mouth, and that is what they can do. So so I hope so those are the 7 points. So please sit like that, and the most important feature of this is to keep your back straight. We visualize that there is a center channel that runs through our body from the crown of our head down to 4 inches below our navel. And this center channel is where our life force is moving up and down through this. And then there's the intersection between the different chakras. So we want to keep that center channel completely straight. So that's why it's important to keep our back straight. The center channel is very thin, like a straw, and is parallel to the spine. So we visualize that. And then we take a deep breath through both nostrils. And we fill our lungs with fresh, clean, pure air. And we expand the belly. We expand our diaphragm. We pull out the abdomen, and it forces the diaphragm down, and that pulls in air in our lungs. And we hold that breath. So our chest remains neutral. Our chest shouldn't move. The movement is in our abdomen. And then we exhale by contracting the abdomen against the diaphragm, which then pushes against the lungs and pushes all the stale, negative, dark air out through both nostrils. And we hold that vacant breath. Maintain our posture. We breathe in again through both nostrils. Expand the diaphragm, expand the abdomen, hold the breath. Exhale through both nostrils, squeeze the abdomen, squeeze the diaphragm, push the stale, negative, dark air out, and hold that breath. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. And exhale. Breathe in. And out. Breathe in. And out. Breathe in fresh, clean, pure air coming in. Visualize it as being clear or being white air, pure air. Holding the breath. Exhale through both nostrils, pushing out stale, negative, dark air out. And hold that vacant breath. Breathe in. Hold it. Exhale. Breathe in. Watch your breath coming in through your nostrils. Fresh, clean, pure, positive air coming out. Exhale. Stale, negative, dark air going out. Watching your breath. Breathe in. Exhale. In. And out. When thoughts arise in your mind, just let them go and just watch the breath coming in and going out. Breathe in. Out. Check your body posture. Keep your back straight. Relax your shoulders. Breathe in. out. Breathe in deeply. Hold it. Exhale completely. Hold it. Breathe in deeply. Exhale completely. Breathe in completely. Exhale completely. Breathe in deeply. Exhale completely. Breathe in deeply. Exhale completely. Last cycle, breathe in completely, very deeply. Hold it. Exhale completely. Now continue in the posture. Breathe at your own pace. Breathing in, exhaling. Just let your mind rest. When thoughts arise, just let them go and watch your breath. If you need to breathe in completely, deeply, and exhale completely to stabilize your mind, go back to watching the breath with that structure. Otherwise, just stay relaxed. Let thoughts come and let them go. Take a deep breath. Fill your lungs with fresh, clean, pure air. Breathe in very deeply. Expand your abdomen. Hold the breath. Exhale very completely. Squeeze the abdomen. Force all the stale negative air out. Breathe in again and raise your arms up over your head if you can. If you have any physical restrictions, don't hurt yourself. Bring your hands together and then look up at the ceiling between your hands and stretch your arms. Stretch your back. Stretch your neck. Look up at the ceiling and stretch. And exhale. Relax your arms, bring them back down to your sides. Exhale, hold that empty breath. Breathe in, raise your arms up over your head. Look up through your hands at the ceiling and stretch, holding the breath. Exhale, relax your arms, come back down to your side. Hold that vacant breath. One last time, breathe in very deeply, raise your arms up over your head. Look up at the ceiling between your hands, stretch. Exhale, relax your arms. Hold the empty breath. Open your eyes. Okay. So that's a simple meditation technique, watching the breath. Meditation, our meditation, the way we talk about it, it is an active process. It's not a passive process. It's an active process. So what we are trying to do is to focus the physical body and intellectually align ourselves with the relaxation of the physical body. And then what happens, the heart opens up, that spiritual body opens up. So over time, practicing this over and over again, there's many different practices like this, and we'll try several techniques like this in the coming weeks. But this is the simplest and really the most profound. This is actually the same meditation technique that Buddha Shakyamuni used when he attained enlightenment, when he sat underneath the meditation tree. So we always have our breath with us. It's always easy to focus on our breath. Anybody have any comments or questions about?
Thank you for that. Thank you.
I'm sorry, somebody was speaking? Who was speaking? Okay. All right, well then, very good.
Lance,
It was me. I was just saying thank you. Sorry, Bunny.
You're
just
welcome.
saying thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yes.
Bonnie, you were saying something?
I want to thank you for giving us this time. It's really special. I'm sure everybody has a busy day. This is the first time today I've gotten to sit down and relax, and it was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome. Glad that you're here. And our best wishes to William, who is recovering from his surgery, and he's having some issues with getting his medication balanced. So we should continue our Medicine Buddha prayers, dedication for William and all beings who are in the hospitals and are homesick, suffering from injuries and surgeries and so on. And we know that Ryan asked for Medicine Buddha prayers for his friend. So there's many people that we can visualize, those that we may know and those that we don't know. So just as a short review of what we talked about last week. So can anybody tell me what the main point of last week was? And you can use your books. You've got your outline books. So turn your microphone on, and what was the main point that we were trying to establish in last week's chapter? Rebecca, did you have something? I see you turn your microphone on.
The 5 families?
The 5 families, yes. And why? And what are they the 5 families of?
Oh, that's it. Well done.
The Buddha.
Right.
I just read that here.
Well, that's okay. Remember, an educated man knows how to reference material. So the point was that we all have Buddha nature. It's all within ourselves. We were born with it. We've always had it. We have it now, and we will eject it when we leave our body, when we die. That Buddha nature is indestructible. And there's 5 families, we say, this is symbolic, 5 families that realize that. So what are the 5 families? Does somebody remember the first family that we talked about?
The disconnected?
Right. And how is it, what does it mean that they are disconnected?
They're not moved by seeing suffering.
Okay. That's one example, yes. So here there was the disconnected family have 6 traits. You see that in the outline book? There's 6 traits. So the first one was, even if they see the suffering and faults of some sort, they're not moved. They don't realize that they are in this ocean of suffering. They just take it for granted that this is all that there is. What was the second one?
The indefinite family.
Well, no, I'm still on the disconnected family.
Oh, if they hear about the Buddha and his qualities, they don't have faith in it. They're not interested.
Right. So there's not a spiritual connection. You know, so whether it's the Buddha or it's Christ or some other holy being, there's this lack of a spiritual connection here. What was the third thing in the disconnected family?
No modesty.
And what does that mean?
I assume it means too much. I assume it means pride.
Okay, that's a good way of looking at it, you know. And what are they prideful of?
Bodies.
What was that?
Their bodies?
Their bodies? Yes, but indirectly, you know. This more goes to the pridefulness that Ed was mentioning. And, you know, the pridefulness that they think that the things that they do as bad as they may be, as hurtful they may be to other beings and to themselves, they have no modesty in that, thinking that, oh, I've done these terrible things. You know, they have no shame that I've done these things to other people. I've allowed these things to happen. So there's no modesty, there's no shame in the negativity that they have allowed to manifest in their lives or around them. So then the fourth one is, somebody tell me what that is.
No thought for what others may think.
Okay, so what does that mean?
I think several of these mean the same thing, which is you're entirely self-centered.
Well, I think generally speaking, that's true in an ignorant way, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, and they have a delusion that they are, you know, self-important.
Right.
You know, and so this fourth point that says no thought for what others may think. They don't care that people might think that they're ignorant or stupid or something like that. As a matter of fact, they may have a certain pridefulness in that. You know, if they're neurotic, they may take a pridefulness in their neuroticism. You know, they don't care what other people think, and they'll continue doing it with impunity in their own minds. Even if someone talks to them and calls them up on the phone and says, you know, you really are behaving in a bad way, or they're looking at them person to person, looking in their eyes and saying, you know, you're really being very hateful and creating distrust among people and so on. Why don't you change? And they say, why should I? You change.
And other channels were warned not to care too much what other people think.
In other channels, what do you mean? Where?
Well, I mean, there's a force in our culture that says, be courageous, stand up, be your own person. Don't be influenced by, don't be afraid of people who disagree with you.
Well, that's true. But there's examples where that can be harmful to beings. So
Yeah.
where's the morality in that?
Right.
You know, does that imply a sense of morality?
I'm sorry, does what imply a sense of morality?
By standing up and saying what you think. You know, does that imply that it's automatically a moral thing that they're standing up for? It may be standing up and saying, we got to fight everybody. They're our enemies.
Well, it may or may not be a moral thing depending on what you're standing up for.
Well, that's the point, and we have to examine what that is. You know, and to allow ourselves to develop a sense of morality, what is harmful, you know, and to be able to create a standard for ourselves, a code for ourselves. And I understand that can be one person's code can be somebody else's, you know, enemy code. And but there's a certain common sense, I think, that has to be applied here. So in the Buddhism, you know, here it's specific. It is talking about what that code is. It's talking about virtue, and it's defining that virtue. It's defining non-virtue. So we have something to measure ourselves with. So
Vance, couldn't
yes.
that no thought for what others may think also be not respecting other people's opinions?
Of course, sure. Yeah. And being harsh about it and saying, oh, you're so stupid. You don't understand.
Yeah, my way is the right way.
Yeah. And I know we all get exasperated at certain times, you know, with our children, you know, our family, with with people we work with, and we think that we're being helpful, constructive criticism, but it's just driving them further into their into their isolation, into their own confusion, by not being able to gently expose them to their what their confusion is, what the cause of their confusion is. We're not taking the time to do that. We don't have the skillful means to be able to do that. But we try and develop that. So then the fifth one, somebody want to speak about that?
Well, you have no compassion
For what?
for other beings.
Yes. And for, what's an example of that?
Well, like if I watched the news and heard about, people starving in another country, and I said, who cares? They should just work harder.
Right. Or people are sick, or people are in wartime or something like that. Say, oh, that's happening there. I have no compassion for those beings that are suffering in that way. So we may be limited in what it is that we can do to help them in terms of, money or time or some ability, some wisdom that we can give them to help them out of their way. We may be limited as to what we can do, but one thing that we can do is that we can recite the altruistic motivation prayer, which is the first prayer in our prayer book, the altruistic motivation. And we're sending compassion to other beings that we don't know. We've only heard of their sickness. We've heard of their sufferings in wartime. We've heard of their famine and so on. And we're trying to send at least compassion to them from our heart to their heart, and realizing that all our hearts are all beating together, that we're all brothers and sisters on this planet. And if they're suffering, it's causing our suffering. If we're suffering, it causes suffering in others. But if we can be happy, we can influence, we can have a positive effect on other people that are suffering, to show them happiness and so on. So this is part of what our meditation practice is about, to be able to focus our attention on suffering beings and being able to open ourselves up to compassion for those suffering beings. The disconnected family, they don't have a connection to that. They don't realize it. And if it's been explained to them, they don't have a caring about it. They just dismiss it. Say, oh, that doesn't affect me. So remember, we all have this Buddha nature within ourselves. We all have loving kindness within ourselves. We all have compassion within ourselves. We all have joy within ourselves. We all have equanimity within ourselves. And whether we call it the Buddha, or we call it Christ, or we call it Vishnu, or we call it Krishna, or God, or anything else, it's the same enlightened mind, that same true nature that we have for love and compassion, what we call bodhicitta, the holy enlightened mind, for ourselves and for all beings. So number 6 of the disconnected family. Anybody want to speak to that? So that goes to, this is not having regret for when their non-virtue, their harsh behavior is revealed to them. They have no regret for it. Oh yeah, I killed those people, but they had it coming. They deserved it. I stole from those people. Yes, I made them think that they were investing in something really wise, but I knew the truth that this was a folly, and now I'm able to take their money and enjoy their money. And I have no regret that I did that. And that might have been their whole life savings, but I did that. So there's many examples like this. So the whole premise of this is that we have this true nature within ourselves. And part of what we're doing, a huge part of what we're doing, is coming to recognize that and be responsible for that. So whether it's as a Christian, whether it's as a Jew, whether it's as a Hindu, whether it's as a Buddha, whether it's as a Muslim, whatever tradition we are following, there is that sensibility, there is that essence that we have this pure nature. The disconnected family is not realizing that. Those of us that do realize it now have a responsibility to ourselves and to everyone else to help as much as best as we can.
But Lance, one question. They do have the same nature as we do. And why does some tend to recognize it quicker than others? Our true nature.
Well, at the essence of it, it's because of their actions that they have done in their lifetimes that have compounded with certain circumstances that allow them to live in the negative, to live in the non-virtuous, rather than to see the positive and to see the love and to see the happiness that can be overcome. Some people may be in the midst of a famine, and most of the people are totally miserable because of the famine, but there might be some leaders who say, yes, we are suffering, but we have to do what we can to be able to grow new food. We have to do what we can to bring water in. We need to do what we can. We have to find a way out of this. We have to not lose our love and our compassion for each other. So that person has something that is moving them in that direction. Those people that don't have that have something that has been moving them into the direction of their darkness, of their ignorance, and so
on. I'm interested in how extreme these statements are. I mean, no modesty, no thought, no compassion. I mean, it doesn't say lacking in modesty or not considerate of others, or, I mean, it's you got to be really awful to have none of these things at all.
Well, it's a good point, and it's all by degree. It's all relative, and here in America, we have many, many great things that we can be very grateful for and so on, but that doesn't stop us from not being compassionate for the people that are overseas suffering in a famine or something like that.
But the way they're worded, it doesn't seem to allow for relativity.
Well, this is why we explain it. And you got to remember that this outline is very empirical. So if we took time to read the book, I think maybe it's a little bit more nuanced than maybe this outline is. And plus, and that question that you just answered is food for contemplation and food for meditation. What does this mean? And looking at that, that's what we all need to do, to look at, why am I Buddha? Why am I not Buddha? Why am I suffering? Why am I not suffering? Why are others suffering? Why are they not suffering? And to look at all this, to examine this. This is what we do during our meditation. This is what we do during that time. We call it meditation. And I think as a culture in the West, we've been led to think that meditation is only not having any thought. But it's not true. You know, to get to that point of no thought like that means that you have exhausted all these other things that are constantly interrupting our minds and finding the answers to those things, understanding those things. And even then, when we get to the meditative mind, when we get to that pure meditative mind, what we call that, thoughts are still coming, but they're just passing right through. You're aware, but you're also quiet. You hear when you're in meditation, you still hear everything. If your eyes are open, you still see everything. If your nose is working, you can still smell everything. But the point is you're not letting it interrupt your peace of mind. So all these, questions, they seem so we take for granted, but it's those things that are constantly pulling at us and interrupting our peace of mind. So I'm sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Now, this disconnected family, aren't these the people that we're trying to help? That we as Buddhists are showing compassion for?
We're trying to help all beings, sure.
Sure, but I mean, because
all beings.
One day, even these people, they're disconnected as they may be, will one day be a Buddha, or
they all have Buddha nature within themselves.
Yeah, they'll recognize it one day.
But they may not recognize it in this lifetime. So if that person is called, Sam or whatever, Sam may not recognize it in this lifetime, but that life force that Sam is associated with in a later life may come to be able to recognize that. At the same time, Sam may have experienced that true nature, but because of his lack of faith, suppressed it. And the ego said, why are you wasting your time here thinking about things like that? You could be having so much fun. Why don't you come with me? If you remember the story of the Buddha, when we talked about when he sat underneath the tree and he became enlightened in that night, he had the 3 demons come. And those were those demons that were coming up that said, why don't you come with me? Why are you wasting your time here? Another way of saying is, why aren't you a spiritual being? Why don't you want to be, just an ordinary being locked in the physical, locked in the intellect? Why, and then the Buddha said, I want to be a spiritual being. That's the proper way to say it. The Buddha said, I want to be a spiritual being, so the physical aspects and the intellectual aspects go away. They become relative. So I please forbear with me on this, but this is the first chapter for a very specific reason. And it's making a very specific point that we all have Buddha nature, but within these 5 families, that we fall into these 5 families, maybe not in a succession of things, but, by some degree, we're in all of these. And maybe at different parts of our lives, we are all of these, and we know others that are all of these. And the thing that we're doing is educating ourselves that these things are prevalent in our world and coming to recognize these things. By doing this, we recognize that it's ourselves that are keeping ourselves from our true nature, that which we call the Buddha or that which we call Christ or whatever. So we need to really be stable. We need to be firm in this. We need to have an understanding of this. Not that we can have a great epiphany right now or a breakthrough, but enough to be able to say, I need to think about this some more. We just can't dismiss this. So the next family is the dubious family or the infinite family that goes to teachings and so on, but doesn't have, it's got a lot of doubt. It's holding back. And it is based on whether somebody is there kind of pulling them in. They're not doing it on their own. They have somebody else who is kind of leading them to it. They're not, even if a holy book fell in their lap, they may not recognize that holy book. But then somebody may come along and say, oh, you've got that holy book. You should read it. And by the way, let's go to this chapter and let's open it up and let's talk about this. That person still may be dubious about that. That's the dubious family. You say, well, okay, I'll give you a few minutes. We can talk about this. But they may not, at this point, believe it. So this is the indefinite dubious family. And then the next one is the hearer family or the Shravaka. These are those who are motivated out of fear that if I don't do these things, I'm going to go to hell. I'm going to suffer in some way. I got to develop virtue because if I don't, I'm going to wind up in some kind of trouble. I'm going to wind up in jail. I'm going to wind up in hell. I'm going to wind up, being miserable. That's their motivation. Is the negativity is their motivation. But they're not. They haven't crossed over to the point of being able to recognize to be grateful and to be able to help other beings with it. It's very selfish. They're thinking about their own fearfulness. They're thinking about their own calamities that they're trying to avoid by developing some sense of virtue. The solitary realizer is the same to the point of becoming arrogant about it, saying, oh, I have found something and I'm not going to share it with anybody. I'm going to hold it for myself because my ego now attaches to that and says, oh, I'm this holy person. But if I give it to other beings, then they may be more holy than me, and I can't stand that. My ego won't be able to deal with that. So I'm going to withdraw. I'm going to stay in my own hermitage. I'm going to stay in my own place and just think how great I am. The solitary realizer. And they may have realized some really good, important things. But as I say, they are based on their fears, they are unwilling to share it with others. We need to meditate on this. We need to think about this. We need to identify people that we know that are like this. We have had these feelings ourselves. This is what meditation is. This is what the contemplation part, when we first sit down and we're going through all these things. And then we come to the Mahayana family, which is the middle way family, which is out of the extremes, in the center. So all these other things were extremes. The extremes of being a disconnected being, the extreme of being a dubious being, the extreme of being an arhat, the extreme of being a solitary realizer, a pratyeka Buddha. The arhats and the pratyeka Buddhas would be like the priests, would be like the monastics, whatever tradition it might be. They're doing it to prevent themselves from going to hell. Not all of them, but maybe some of them. And if you know history and you study history and you hear some of these stories, it'll be revealed that this is what they were doing, including in Buddhism. Many of the monks and the nuns, this is their motivation. They're not immune from this at this point. But in the Mahayana family is the middle way. This is the way of what we call the Bodhisattva, the holy enlightened being who is on the path now of developing virtue, cultivating virtue, cultivating the wisdom of what the virtue is and what the non-virtue is, understanding both of those things. We're not suppressing non-virtue, we're revealing non-virtue. We're transforming non-virtue into virtue. And we do that through the skillful means. And the skillful means is the compassion of the wisdom. If we have wisdom and we don't do anything to actualize the wisdom, it just remains wisdom, then we haven't done anything to help anybody. We just are arrogant thinking that we've accomplished something. This is the Pratyeka Buddha, the solitary realizer. But if we take that and we actualize it and say, okay, I'm going to help these beings, I'm helping myself, I'm helping these beings to recognize non-virtue and virtue, now you're doing something, and this is the middle way. This is the Bodhisattva, the holy enlightened being who is on the path to becoming to recognizing their pure nature. They've had glimpses of it, and maybe they've had visions of it. They're trying to abide in it. They're trying to remain in it all the time. And they're going through the successions of their purification in order to be able to do that. But again, it's a very active process. It's not I'm going to sit down until I attain enlightenment kind of a thing. All the thoughts are going to escape from my mind and I'm going to be left with nothing but enlightenment. It doesn't work that way. You got to work for it. We have to eliminate all the other stuff as being all the interruptions and all the confusions that are blocking that true nature, which is what we call the Buddha nature.
Are these categories, well, particularly the first four, are they mutually exclusive?
No, they actually can be a progression. I'm sorry, your microphone just turned off.
I can have characteristics that fall in more than one family.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we can fall backwards.
Right.
Yeah. So the delusion that we suffer is that we don't realize that. And we just think, oh, everything's perfect. I'm great. I've had a great life. I got everything materially that I want. I've got everything materially, intellectually that I desired, that I want. And what a great life. But meanwhile, you still have this spiritual vacuum, or you may have this spiritual vacuum in your life. Or it is one that is based on fear, or based on arrogance, or something like that. How pure is that spirituality that I'm doing it not just for myself, I'm doing it for the benefit of others. So this is the primary cause for our wanting to be enlightened, to recognize our true nature. This is the way we really are. This is who we really want to be. We want to be free. And if you remember going back to the talk that we had about the four truths, the four noble truths, that we all beings have suffering, and the cause of the suffering is our desire, our emotions. And that to be able to release those emotions means that we have to just literally cut off the causes for those emotions. We have to stop being emotional. But how do we do that? So we do that through examining our lives through the Eightfold Path. That's the fourth noble truth. The Eightfold Path was to have the right view that liberation is possible, that freedom is possible, that we have this freedom within ourselves, and it's us who blocks it up, and that we have the right effort to continue to see that, to work with that, to keep it paramount in our minds, to have the right speech, to always speak the truth, to have the right conduct, to always do good deeds, to have the right livelihood, that we're in society, we're all connected with everybody else, and to have something that where we can share our skills and so on, and to have the right effort, to be constantly trying to move forward and not getting ourselves lazy and plateauing at a particular level, or worse, going backwards, that we always have the right effort to move forward, and that we have the right mindfulness to be aware of what it is that we're doing at all these different things, you know, at the physical level, at the intellectual level, and at the spiritual level. And then finally is to be the right temple, to be the right vessel for this, and to have respect for our body, to have respect for our life, and say that we are the embodiment of all this wisdom, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So we become the absorption of this, the concentration of this. So this should be our daily practice of reciting this to ourselves. This can be the Four Noble Truths can be part of our daily practice, to say, okay, in the morning when I first get up, or the last thing before I go to sleep, or whenever it's convenient for you, that you have this program that you repeat, this practice that you repeat, that reminds you of all these elements that we're talking about. Otherwise, it's just going in one ear and out the other, and it doesn't stay with us. There's no transformation. We can remain the disconnected family. Oh, it doesn't matter. Or, oh, I'm already perfect. I don't need to do this. So moving on, if anybody has anything to say, don't hesitate to speak up. But now we move to the next chapter, which is the working basis, precious human life. In other words, the working basis, what we have to reconnoiter all of this is our human life. Animals can't do this. Your dogs and your cats and birds and other animals, the wild animals, they have no sensibility about any of this. Any subterranean beings, any beings that are living in the oceans, have no sensibility of this. It's only human beings that can recognize this. And this becomes our working basis. So this is something that we are born with. This is the gift of life that we have given ourselves, to be a human being. And not only to be a human being, but to be a human being in this space and time, in this land that we live, to be able to have these educational benefits, and to be able to seize those, and to be able to recognize that there is this spiritual body, and I need to come to recognize that more and more. These are qualities of the precious human life. So to be able to seize that and not take it for granted. So we say here there's this particular prayer, and we're going to talk about this more as we go along, but here in this very beginning of this page number 4 in the booklet that you have, it says, ho, this kind of leisure and endowment is so difficult to obtain. When one obtains a physical body, which is easily lost, do not waste it but rather use it to attain the ultimate liberation, joyous result. So what does this mean? Oh, I'm very happy. I have gratitude. Oh, this kind of leisure and endowment is difficult to obtain. Where we live now, who we all are looking at our computer screens right now at each other and so on, we're very fortunate. There's many, many people on the planet who have no idea that this is possible to be able to do anything like this. There are beings on the planet who have no idea of what it is to be able to go to proper schools and to have proper plumbing in their homes and to have ample food and to live in ways that we live, and we have such leisures because of that. But we confuse that, you see, and we say, oh, I have all these responsibilities, I have all these things, I don't have time to do my spiritual things or the things that you're asking me to do. I don't have time, I'm too busy. You know, that's one of the traps that we fall into. You know, that's what Western people do. They block out their spirituality. Spirituality is very subtle. It's very easily overcome, marginalized. You know, the physical body and the intellect is much more nagging. Oh, I got to pay attention to that. Oh, I got to go to work. Oh, I got to get a better job. Oh, I want a better house. I want a better car. I need to work out. I need to exercise, you know, otherwise I can't do these things and so on. So there's more immediate motivation for us to recognize the physical body and the intellect. The spirituality can be suppressed, like I said. But we have these leisures that this is the time to be able to do it. If we lived in the middle of India, for instance, right now, who's going through this epidemic, they don't have time to think about this. And even before the epidemic came, many of those people are living such a subsistence level that all they're doing all day long, as soon as they get up, is to go to work in the fields and try and get some food and come back and eat. And then they go to sleep for a few hours and they get up and they do it over again. And that's their entire life. They don't have any time to think about their spirituality. They don't have any time to think about going to school properly, to be able to learn to be a craftsman or to learn to be a professional person or something like that. They're living at that subsistence level and so on. But we have these leisures to be able to enhance our lives, to be able to do greater things. So what are these leisures? These leisures are enumerated for us here. And, you know, so here you see it says, what does these leisures mean? It means to be free from the 8 unfavorable conditions. So what are the 8 unfavorable conditions that befall human beings? Well, number 1, they can be born in a hell realm where there's constant suffering, no opportunity to practice Dharma. They are an improper vessel. So this might be an example of those that are living in a war zone, constant suffering. They don't know if they're going to make it through the day, if a bomb is going to go off, if or they're going to have to kill somebody to protect their own lives, or somebody's going to kill them. They don't know, and it's like being in a hell. I mean, what do you imagine a hell to be like? You know, in a hell, I think, you know, we can imagine that it's like that you're going to die at any moment. And it's going to be a terrible death. It's going to be a death of injury. It's going to be a death of disease. It's going to be a death of a mortal wound or something like that. And that I'm going to have to take other people's lives to protect my own. It's like a living hell. You know, if anybody's been in the military and, you know, and if you've been overseas and had to fight in battles or to be a policeman and to be put into that kind of danger, or to be a fireman and to be put in that kind of danger that they are risking their lives. They are walking into what can be a hellish experience, but they are doing it with courage and so on, to be able, but they're doing it also with loving kindness and compassion, joy and equanimity, if they do it with an enlightened mind and heart. There are some who are doing it out of the game of being in that hell and enjoying it. So we have to recognize that we, talking about us right now, maybe are free from that. Or maybe at certain points of our lives, we've been in that situation. Maybe we've been in the military, or we've been in a police situation, or something like that. Or maybe, we've been able to see it through other family members or friends, or through things that we've read or things that we've seen on movies and television and so on, and that we can bring in and be able to vicariously experience it. So let's say, for sake of discussion right now, we're free of that. We're free of the second thing, of the hungry ghost. The hungry ghost realm, being a hungry ghost, means that you're totally miserable. Why are you totally miserable? Because you're insatiable. These hungry ghosts are symbolized by having these big fat bodies, round bodies, and very little feet and very little hands, and a very long neck and a very small mouth. And what it means is they have no real good locomotion. They have no real ability to be able to grab things for themselves, to satisfy them things. And whatever they get, they can't get much in through their little mouths, and they have to swallow through these long necks for it to get into them. They're constantly unsatisfied. They're constantly miserable. So whether it's food or it's water that they're looking for, which are just similes for intellectual things, that I never have the house I want, I never have the family I want, I never have the clothing I want, I never can take the vacations I want, I'm always miserable, I'm always insatiable. So maybe we've gone through that in our lives. Maybe we're going through it today. Maybe we know people like that. But there are people who are caught up in that so much that there's no time for them to be able to think about their spirituality. They're so locked up in their misery. Maybe you know somebody like that. The next one is to be born in the animal realm, who is ignorant. A dog doesn't know it's a dog. A dog doesn't know the difference, may see a cat and recognize that it's not the same as a dog, but at the same time, it doesn't recognize who it is. The cat doesn't recognize anything else. The birds don't recognize anything else, and on and on. They're ignorant of their own selves. They're ignorant of being able to make any changes within their realm. They have no intelligence to be able to do that. They have no skills to be able to do that. So we're not born in the animal realm. We're not born in that ignorance. Then the next one is to not be born a barbarian. And in our lifetime, we've seen this, that there was terrible things that was happening in the Middle East, and we saw barbarian lives waging war against innocent people, doing terrible things. They had a rationalization for it, but we looked at that and said, they're barbarians. How can they be cutting these people's heads off and doing terrible things that they do to them? It's like, what we read about, that happened in, when the Mongolians and so on came down into Europe, and, they just came through nations and they just waged all this terrible, harm onto people and so on. And they enjoyed it, this barbarian behavior. Well, we're not born that way. We don't have that problem. So that we're not born as a long life God. So these long life gods, we have to think of them in terms of these beings who are like on these ivory pedestals. Those beings who are in, great places, who have apparent great wisdom to be able to have all the answers for people and so on, but they don't have the compassion to be able to help them to actualize this wisdom. And these people are like gods. Maybe you could also think of it like the pantheon of gods, the Greek gods or the Roman gods, and these gods were there, when people would pray to them to bring rain and to bring food and to bring pregnancy and all these different things. But these gods, they weren't really there. They were figments of these people's imagination. So we're not born as these kinds of gods, these imaginary gods. And we're not born among people that hold wrong views, who do not understand karma. Now, this one gets a little more subtle, and we may be born because there's a lot of what seem to be intelligent people who seem to do things with impunity that we know, because we practice the golden rule, that these people are going to pay for somewhere along the line. The suffering that people have caused because of their lack of compassion, for their lack of being able to help those beings and so on. And we say, my goodness, how are these people getting away with it? There's not anything I can do about it. But at some point, they're going to have to pay for that. But those people don't recognize that. They have wrong views. They don't recognize the natural law of reciprocity, the natural law of what we say, karma. Karma, cause and result. That there is this invisible law that we are all subject to. We know that when we do good things happen to us. We also know that when we do bad things happen to us. But some people are oblivious to this because they have insulated themselves from recognizing those good things and bad things. They live in a delusion. So we are not those beings. We have the leisure of not being those beings. And that we are not born in a land that doesn't teach these spiritual teachings, that doesn't teach the teachings of the Buddha, or whether it's the teachings of the Christ or the teachings of Mohammed or whatever, that doesn't have these moral teachings. Here it's expressed in the Buddhism, so we focus on the Buddhism because the Buddhism is very specific about the way in which it talks about this. It's very articulate. There's many, many books written about this. This system of the Dharma is very well articulated for us to be able to follow. So we hold that as a great example of that we have this ability to be able to do this, and that we're not void of this, that we are born in a land where this is prevalent. We're not born in a land where it's not available to us. And there's many places where it's not available to them. And many places where it might have been available to them, but through the act of barbarians or ignorant people who have come along and who have destroyed that. One of the worst things that people do is destroying books, destroying, lifestyles, destroying religious figures, spiritual figures, and so on like that. So we've seen that. And we're fortunate that we live in a land that doesn't have that. But there are people that are subject to that. They may be born here, but I'm saying this group here, we can recognize these differences. And the last one is rebirth as a stupid person. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way, but stupidity in its essence is someone who might be unable to be able to comprehend virtue and non-virtue. They were born with a mind that was not healthy mind, and they don't have that ability. So here it's referred to as a stupid person who can't understand that between virtue and non-virtue. So these 8 leisures, or these 8 unfavorable conditions, we are free from. So we say that we have these leisures. But then with all this leisure time, we find ways to make ourselves busy and say, oh, now I'm too busy to be able to develop my spirituality. What do you think of that?
Lance,
Yes. Hi, Grant.
hi. When you first talked about this, it reminded me of the verse in the Bible, to whom much is given, much will be required. I mean, is that a Buddhist concept? Because there also seems some counter things to that, like the fact that you're given much, does that have to do with your past life and the karma of past lives? And you know, this is an area that I'm not very knowledgeable at all. Like, is a lama because of his past karma was very good, versus a slave that only lived, let's say, 20 years. There was some karmic aspect to his life being the way it was, and that he had no leisure time. He lived only 20 years, things like that.
Well, yeah, I think the first way you brought the question up was, yes, for those who have these leisures, have these benefits, and so on, there is a responsibility to be able to share these things, to be able to help people, and so on. You know, that is part of the philosophy of the Dharma, the Buddha Dharma, to be able to do that at whatever levels we can do that. And even if we don't have much, we can still have prayer. We can still have meditation. We can still take 5 minutes and develop that spirituality and so on. And we'll talk much more about this in weeks to come and so on. But yes, in that way, we want to share whatever benefits we have with other beings. Does that answer the question? Was there more to it that you wanted to delve into?
Well, I was asking I have no knowledge at all about like karma and things like that. Is your
Yeah, well, we're going to
current-
talk a lot about that. So at this point, you know, karma is a Sanskrit word that means action. And before we can take any action, there has to be a cause. There has to be a thought to say, okay, I'm going to do this thing. And when I do this thing, there's an action, but then there is a result to that action. So when we're talking about karma, we're talking about the karma, the action we take, the cause that made that action come, and then the result of that. So it is it sounds like a simple proposition, and in essence it is, but we're going to talk more about how it manifests and how we can recognize those causes, how we can purify those causes so that our actions become pure actions rather than impure actions, and the results become virtuous results and not non-virtuous results. So yes, quite a bit of time is spent about that. We talk a lot about that. So it's a good question. So these 8 leisures, so going back to this prayer at the top of this page, it says this kind of leisure and endowment is so difficult to obtain. How many people are on the planet? What is it? 7.5 billion people are on the planet, I think. And how many people out of those 7.5 billion do you think have some spiritual awareness? Do you think it's 7.5 billion? You think it's half of that? You think it's a third of that? A quarter of that? You know, who knows? You know, some sociologists may be able to figure that out or something, be able to talk about that. But then, you know, who is able to be the embodiment of that spirituality? Who has a precious human life? So we're going to talk more about this. We're going to dig a little deeper to understand this. So this is so difficult to obtain. So it says when we obtain a physical body, which is easily lost, we can get sick, we can get injured, you know, things can happen that we don't understand, that we didn't expect, and we lose our life, or our life changes. So we can't waste this life that we have, and that we use it to attain the ultimate liberation, which is joyous result. So joyous result as a human being, that we are doing good deeds for other beings, that we are living like a Buddha. We are living like a bodhisattva, a holy enlightened being. We are, living an awakened life. So whether it's the Christ or whether it's Buddha or it's Muhammad or Moses or any of these great beings who have done wonderful things that we all look to and respect thousands of years later and so on, these become our examples, these become our models. So we just talked about the 8 leisures. There are the 10 endowments. So human beings, some of these human beings have these endowments. So what are these endowments? Endowments are like investments, right? Endowments are something that through time and resources were invested into our lives. So we look at this, that there are 5 external of the endowments. So it's born where a Buddha has arrived in this world, where a Buddha has taught the precious Dharma. The Dharma continues to be taught. There is a Sangha to maintain the teachings. The Sangha is a community. There is love and kind support to continue the Dharma practice. So externally, we can say we're very fortunate because we are born in a place where all these are, the answer is yes, we have these things. The Buddha, the teachings are here, you know, we can understand this, there's support for this and so on. So we have the benefit of these endowments externally, outside of ourselves. But then there's 5 internally that say that we are born as a human being. We're not born as an animal. We're not born as an insect. We're not born as a hungry ghost. We're not born as a low human being. We're born as a human being. We're born in an area that has the holy teachings, and that we're born with the full faculties of the senses. So we are able to, if say we're born blind or we go blind, we're able to compensate. You know, generations ago, that might have been a different story. Someone might have been really handicapped, but we don't look at it as being handicapped so much anymore. We say, okay, the senses, the other senses can help compensate for that lost sense. And so we're not going to put down those that can't hear, or those that can't see, or those that can't taste and smell, and so on like that. So that we haven't committed the 5 heinous crimes. The 5 heinous crimes are the evil deeds of killing your father, killing your mother, killing a holy being, an arhat, causing injury to a Buddha, or causing a schism in the Sangha, in the community, to driving a wedge through people that are there for, you know, sacred reasons, for holy reasons and so on, and not bringing divisiveness into that. And that the next internal one is having devotion to the Dharma teachings, to recognizing that the Buddha was a great teacher, and that his teachings are worthwhile to be able to investigate at the very least, and to be able to develop them, to cultivate them, and see how we can bring them into our lives, regardless of what other spiritual proclivities we may have, whatever we think, because Buddhism is a philosophy. It's not a religion. A religion, in the strict sense, if you look it up in the dictionary, says that it is man's relationship to a supreme being. In Buddhism, Buddha never professed to be a divine being. Never said that he's come here to be able to bring this divinity and so on. But he said that through living a noble life, through living a virtuous life, one can recognize the divine nature that we do have within ourselves. So the Buddha is not bestowing it. He's allowing you the wisdom, or he's giving you the teachings, he's giving you the practices to recognize it within yourself. So having devotion to this is really wonderful. So, as I say, this is a philosophy of recognizing the self, is another way of saying recognizing the ego, and being able to liberate ourselves from the attachments and the aversions that are based upon the ego, that the ego creates within ourselves. So with these 10 endowments and the 8 leisures, now we have the working basis to be a precious human being, to have a precious human life. So out of the 7.5 billion people on this planet, I don't know, 1 million people, 100,000 people, 5 million people, I don't know. It doesn't matter what the numbers are. But the point is that there is these people, regardless of what religion they follow, that are virtuous people, that are holy people, that are seeking to be able to understand their true nature. And this is what we are trying to do. This is our working basis. This is what we're trying to understand. The rarity of this is in this story of that visualize that there is this ocean that is greater than all the oceans that we know on this planet. Vast, 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 huge, 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 deep, deep, deep ocean. And at the bottom of this ocean is a blind turtle. And once every 100 years, this blind turtle swims up through the ocean and comes to the surface and is able to poke his head through a yolk that has been floating on the surface of the ocean for those 100 years. That's how rare it is to be a precious human being. That's an example of that. How many beings have lived on this planet? There's 7.5 billion now. How many gazillion beings have lived on this planet? Whether they were human beings, or they were animals, or they were insects, or other beings that we don't recognize, there's been gazillions of them. But to have a precious human life is very special. And why is that? Because it's only the human being that can recognize himself and can make changes. All the other beings cannot do that. It's only the human being that can do that. And that's not to become arrogant about. But on this planet, in this samsara, in this phenomenal nature, that is something that we recognize. And we say, okay, I'm grateful I have this life, and now I'm not going to waste it. I am going to do everything I can to have a joyous result so that the rest of my life as a human being becomes a joyous rest of my life. No matter what befalls me, I will accept it with joy and courage. and that I move on with that, helping other beings to find their joyous life. And that when I leave this body, that I take that joy, I take that loving kindness, that compassion, that equanimity, the bodhicitta, the holy enlightened mind, goes and manifests again in another human life, that we're able to continue the work. And maybe we've gotten to this level, but yet there's a greater level to get to, but we're able to succeed at this level, and we're grateful for that. So the example of the blind turtle really brings it home in saying what it is to be a precious human being. So what do you think of that? Does it ring true? Kate Treadwell, what do you think?
Well, the first time I encountered some of these ideas, it blew my mind to say, I'm so lucky I'm a human, not a god. What? Gods have it great. But then it took me a while to really think it through, that, you know, how lucky I am to be able to open my heart up to others. Just to feel that closeness to other. Out of what they're talking about in here, they're saying not everyone has that.
That's right.
What
are our greatest joys? When we do things for other people, isn't it?
Yeah. I also have a question about this. Injury to Buddha. I don't know what that.
That means anything that, you know, has to do with the with it can mean the facilities, you know, where the Buddha is. It can mean the books. It can mean the scriptures. It can mean the iconography, the artwork. You know, anything that connotes that awareness to ourselves or to other beings, to not cause injury to a Buddha.
So it doesn't mean literally attacking Buddha, but it could be like going into the shrine room and trashing the place.
Correct. Because, yes, well, we'll leave it there. Yes. So this is a lot to take in, you know, and but we have to have faith that what we're doing, what we're listening to, what we're thinking about, what we're being told to develop a practice upon, we have to have some kind of faith that this is all true, that it's valid. So here at the bottom of this page, number 4, it says that there's 3 faiths. So the first faith is that there is a trusting faith, that we have to have trust in a teacher. We have to have faith in others. We have to have faith in the books and the scriptures. It says here that suffering is the result of non-virtuous causes. We have to have faith in that statement, that suffering is the result of non-virtuous causes. That happiness is the result of virtuous cause. So if we're doing good things, we'll have good results. If we're doing bad things, we're going to have bad results. So the way in which this is pointed out to us is through our teachers, and by being able to allow them to come into our lives with a objectivity, to be able to point out virtue and non-virtue, because it's very easily to obscure those virtues and non-virtues and not recognize them as being the source of our happiness or our suffering. So to have a teacher, to have trust in the scriptures, to trust in the teachers, is a very important element to this. And maybe it requires a commitment, a commitment that you say, okay, I'm dubious about this. I've got some doubts, but you know what? I'm going to give this some time. Maybe it's a month, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's a year, whatever it is. But I'm going to trust in this because it really seems, at least as I'm recognizing it now on the surface, that there's something here, but there's much more to it that I don't understand. But I'm going to trust this. I'm going to commit to this to allow this to unfold itself into my intellect and my awareness. So that's trusting faith. The second one is a longing faith. The longing faith, it says, one follows the path with respect and reverence to obtain enlightenment. So what does this mean? It means that probably all of us have this kind of yearning within ourselves that maybe we can trace back to being a child, that we knew that there is something that we are part of, but we can't explain it. There's some yearning that I want to be part of that, even if I couldn't recognize it. I yearn for that connection. And now, as we've gotten to this stage in our lives, we realize, oh, I've got a limited amount of time. I've got to really actualize that yearning. I've really got to start digging in. I got to start understanding some more things, because the things that I've had up to this point haven't fully satisfied me. So I need to find something else out. And there's this yearning that says there is something that I can understand. And I want to understand what that is. So we listen to that yearning. We allow that yearning to manifest in our lives. And then we trust in those that seem to be talking about that and allow it to unfold itself, to develop, and so on. So that's the longing faith, the yearning faith. And then there's the clear faith. The clear faith arises in one's mind as the confidence of experience in the three jewels, the body, speech, and mind, that builds and becomes stable. So what this means is that after having this yearning, after having this trusting in the teachings and the teachers and so on, we begin to have experience with this. And we begin to see, oh yes, I can see the change that has manifested in my awareness, in my life. I see that. And I begin to develop the confidence, the clear faith that, yes, this is working. I may not totally understand it at this point. I may not have a total realization of the manifestation of how all this all comes together and so on. But I now have had experience, and I realize that there is a clarity that is coming as a result of this. So in Buddhism, we talk about it as the body, speech, and mind, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. That through our physical body, through our speech, the speech is the agent of the intellect. You have to have thoughts that get manifested as speech. No thought, no speech. So the two are the same thing. The speech is the agent of the brain, of the intellect. So we talk about the body, the speech, and the mind. We talk about the big mind, the spiritual mind, the little mind, the intellectual mind. The intellectual mind is very powerful. It can block up the big mind with all the defilements and all the confusions, all the emotions. So what we're doing now is we're examining the system that allows us to be able to one by one remove those blockages, to remove those hindrances, to be able to remove those obstructions and so on, so that we can see that true nature within ourselves. And what we find is that we are the body of the Buddha. We are the speech of the Buddha. We are the mind of the Buddha. And the Buddha is the awakened one. That we are awakened within ourselves, but we have to remove the junk that's blocking up that awakening. All the confusion and so on, the darkness. So our body, speech, and mind is the clarity, is the realization that all this wisdom is within ourselves. All this compassion is the expression of that wisdom. And the joy is the I'm not saying it right, the habitualization of that loving kindness and compassion. And then the equanimity of seeing that all this is all here. It's all part of the same thing. We're all part of that. And that I can have an influence in bringing light to this symbolic darkness. And that as a group, as a community, we darken more and, we brighten more and more darkness that's all around us and so on. So the body represents the Sangha, represents the community of people who follow this. The speech is the Dharma, is the teachings of the Buddha, the intellectualization of the Buddha practices and so on. And then the mind is that true nature, this true nature of peace, of peaceful mind, happy, joyous. So we experience all this as the working basis.
You go back to trusting faith for a minute.
Sure. Your microphone muted.
Trying to learn a new technique, and I'm not very good at it.
Okay.
I'm pressing the space bar. I've never done that before.
It only does it temporarily as long as you're holding the space bar.
Yeah, I'm learning that. All right, I'm holding the space bar. There's a lot of suffering in the world that does not appear to be the result of non-virtue.
Like what?
Oh, a virtuous person dies of a painful disease.
Okay.
Or gets run over by a truck, or
okay.
And as I say, I'm sure I'm muddling the context here, but
it's a fair example.
Yeah, I just see a lot of suffering that does not appear to be the result of non-virtue.
That's because you can't see the cause of that suffering. You can't see the cause of that karma that is manifesting as that injury or old age, sickness, or whatever that we're all going through. We're all at some level, we're all going to experience that. And we say, why? What is it? It's part of the human condition. And to understand that is to understand, what it is to be a human being. That's part of what we have to understand. We're going to talk about this in a couple of weeks. It's a very important point. But there's a lot that we just don't see. We don't recognize because we're not aware.
Right.
We haven't developed that awareness yet. So we say, oh, I'm aware enough to know that there's nothing there. But that's arrogance.
All right. Well, and it just seems to me I could say about anything, well, X is true, but you just can't see it.
That's true. This is the phenomenal nature of samsara.
Okay.
The scientists are trying to do it. What was the Big Bang? What came before the Big Bang? They haven't figured that out yet, have they? So imagine there was the Big Bang. Let's say the Big Bang was paradise. Let's say the Big Bang was no suffering. And then all of a sudden it erupted and burst, and all this stuff came as a result. So therefore, all this stuff is the suffering of that Big Bang. But we don't know what the cause of that eruption was. Does that mean it's not true?
No, but it doesn't mean it is true either.
Well, we have that to examine. That's part of our examination.
Sorry, I forgot to press the button again. Fair
It's
enough.
okay. But doesn't that make sense?
It's worth pondering.
Okay, good. Okay. Anybody else got a comment?
I want to know what Rebecca's thinking. She looks so contemplative.
I'm not thinking nothing.
You're not thinking nothing?
I'm not thinking nothing. I'm thinking thoughts, but nothing interesting or earth-shattering.
What do you think of this as being
Oh God.
a human being? Had you reached a point, let's say before, 6 months ago or a year ago, had you reached a point in your life where you say, I got it all sussed out, I don't need to know anything else?
You're asking me?
I'm asking everybody.
Everybody.
I'd like to meet that person,
Yeah.
whoever honestly, genuinely feels that way.
I don't think I'd want to meet that person. I think they'd be really annoying.
So
It'd be
in other words,
interesting.
so there's always something new to learn. Is that the other side of that situation?
I feel that way, yes.
It was nice to see your son, Kate.
Oh, thank you. Yes. I'm trying to get him involved, but he likes to come, during the.
How old is he?
Go ahead. He's 5.
Mm.
So a ray of sunshine. Most times. I did have a question about happiness, the emotion. I see the afflictive emotions. We were talking about love and joy, but is happiness, is that also a form of extreme emotion, because emotion has the ability to block wisdom? So then are the positive emotions, are those also a possible cause of obstruction?
Sure.
Is that period, or is that the extreme version, or is it?
Well, it's all conceptual thought. For us to be able to have this conversation, we're conceptualizing those things that we experience as human beings. And this is all phenomenal nature. We're trying to make sense of that. And in this effort, we begin to see things as being permanent or impermanent. It's the permanence that becomes the problem, because we think that we can have happiness and that happiness can be perfectly stable. Happiness is a state of mind. Suffering is a state of mind.
It adds to the delusion, the happiness, then forms attachment.
It gives a connotation to it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Yeah, that makes sense.
So you'll see as we go along, it's being able to understand, what this phenomenal nature, what it appears as, what it actually is just our figments, as figments of our imagination that we agree upon. Now, I know that's a very crazy statement right now, very abstract, but we will talk about that, and we're going to build up to that. We're establishing this. A precious human being can approach that. An ordinary human being would have a great deal of difficulty approaching karma, would have a very difficulty approaching the idea of conceptuality and permanence and impermanence. So we have to establish what it is to be a precious human being amid the 5 families of the Buddha, to be able to have a sense of what our floor is, what our ground is, from where we are coming. So we're moving in graduated steps. So your homework is to, if you've taken notes, to think about your notes, think about this book, maybe do the meditation that we did, the breathing exercises, to do it by yourself. Maybe you can take 15 minutes and take 15 minutes out of your day sometime to be able to do it. You can do it first thing in the morning is the best time, but if that's not practical, you do it some other time. You try and do it at a regular time. So in this round of Buddhism 101, the cycle, we're going to parallel be using meditation along with the academics of what we're learning. So the meditation, that practice, is on you. I can't do that for you. I can help you understand the text, but I can't help you do the meditation. And if you don't do the meditation, it's just all going to be vicarious words going in one ear and out the other. So you've got to allow yourself to have the personal experience of digging in and experiencing this trusting faith, the yearning faith, and the clear faith. Does that make sense? Is that unfair to suggest that to you?
To meditate?
Okay,
It's-
15 minutes
no.
to do the breathing exercise, to read the prayers that are in the book, recite the books. We've been through this. If anybody wants to have a one-on-one conversation to develop this a little bit more, we can do that. But just to take a few minutes, read these prayers, do the 7-point posture of Varanchana, do the breathing exercise. It's not complicated. While it's fresh in your mind, write it down, and to develop a short practice for yourself that you can do every day, or at least try to do every day, and do that, every for this next week, and then we can talk about what kind of a experience you've had with it. Does that make sense, Kate?
Yes, thank you. Could I rephrase or say something about the emotions to make sure I'm understanding or on the right thought track?
Sure.
So emotions, does it also equate to anything that's related to the body that would inevitably lead to attachment, which would therefore become an obstacle?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
The emotions can manifest as psychosomatic propensities, illnesses or clumsiness or things like that. Okay. Ed, does that make sense? I mean, can you develop a practice, you think? Can you do that? Do you want to do that?
I'm working on it.
Okay. Rebecca? Okay. Okay. Jackie, I see Grant, Soho.
I did try meditation, it was just so hard.
Okay, well, you did that practice with us when we first started, that breathing exercise. Do you remember that?
Yeah, it's a bit different from what my friend told me. This, I feel I need to use a lot of had to, I don't know, you had to do a very deep breath and hold it. The other
Yes.
one is more like counting 1 to 10 and then release.
Well, I'd like you to do what we practiced
Okay.
tonight.
Yeah.
Grant, how about you?
Yeah, I meditate every day for at
Oh,
least
good. Right.
20 minutes.
Very good. Jackie, how about you?
I have every intention to meditate.
Okay. All right. I mean, just read the book, read the opening prayers, read them as they are in English. You don't have to do the Tibetan, just read the English and then think about the meditation is just in the beginning is the contemplation, is thinking about it. And then doing the breathing exercise and then just letting it kind of grow with you. And then at the end, then you do the dedication part that we're going to do right now. And then you dedicate whatever merit, whatever skillful means, whatever wisdom you have cultivated, you're dedicating to the benefit of others. So,
I get that and I appreciate that. The challenge that I'm personally battling with myself is I have this time conversation or lack thereof, and I just need to get past that. It's not the act of meditation. It's not that I don't want to. It's that an entire day goes by and I couldn't even get myself on this call in time.
okay, well, that's why it's good to do it first thing in the morning before all the interruptions start happening.
I usually wake up to an interruption, but I hear what you're saying.
Okay, well, interrupt yourself 15 minutes early.
You're right. You're right. I'm not trying to make excuses. It's just I appreciate that. I have to resolve this on myself.
Okay. All right. These two things happen simultaneously. The practice and the academics.
We're having homework now. We're going to have a final exam.
Yeah, you're going to tell me what the benefit has been. And this isn't the first time. I've been doing this for 15 years.
Well,
a lot of people
then you should tell us what the benefit is.
Well, you got to discover it yourself. You see, that's the point.
I understand. I hear you. Yeah.
I mean, the benefit is freedom.
Right.
The benefit is liberation. The benefit is happiness. The benefit is virtue. Okay. Thank you very much for staying with me. I know it's a little bit late. So now we go to page 20, and we'll do page 20 and 21 and 22. We'll recite this. So you recite it with me. Mute your microphone, otherwise it gets to be a cacophony of sound. But all these things you got to do out loud. It's very important to do it out loud. It really is. And we can talk more about the meaning of that next time. But please trust me and do this, and slowly, you'll recognize the benefit. So we begin on page 20 with the Dekorma prayer. By the virtues collected in the three times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate word of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Trikumpa Ratna Shri, who is omniscient, Lord of the Dharma, Master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. The next prayer is the dedication prayer. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, yogins, yoginis, and dakinis dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the three times by myself and all sentient beings in samsara and nirvana and the innate word of virtue not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Sravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Maras and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the by the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones. Thank you all very much. If you have any trouble with any of the words that are in these prayers, remember you got a glossary in this book, the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. So I'm sure most of those words are going to be in that glossary. If they're not, you can do a Google search and you'll be able to find something in your Google search. And Google's gotten very, very good, very, very accurate. So you can trust in that. If there's still a question, you can email me or call me. I'll be glad to talk to you about it, or just write it down and we'll talk about it next week. So please make the effort to do these things. It's what's going to make the difference. Mangalam, Trizala Zamvu Pipa, Alankar Bhavantu, Sarva Mangalam. By the virtue of this practice, may all beings be free from suffering and attain enlightenment. May all beings and activities be auspicious for the benefit of the enlightenment of all sentient beings. Thank you all very much.